Radio, Tuesday, March 3rd. We are running a few, I hear an echo. We're a few minutes behind, but we do have our guests with us. Why am I hearing a big echo? John Perkins wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman some almost 10 years ago. As a chief economist at a major international consulting firm, John Perkins advised the World Bank, United Nations, the IMF, U.S. Treasury Department, Fortune 500 corporations, and countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East. He worked directly with heads of state and CEOs of major companies. His books on economics and geopolitics have sold more than 1 million copies, spent many months on the New York Times and other bestseller lists, and are published in over 30 languages. John's Confessions of an Economic Hitman spent 70 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a startling expose of international corruption. His The Secret History of the American Empire, also New York Times bestseller, details the clandestine operations that created the world's first truly global empire. His Hoodwinked is a blueprint for a new form of global economics. The solutions are not return to normal ones. Instead, John challenges us to soar to new heights, away from predatory capitalism and into an era more transformative than the agricultural and industrial revolutions. His writings detail specific steps each of us can take to create a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. And you're also a founder and board member of Dream Change and the Pachamama Alliance, nonprofit organizations devoted to establishing a world our children will want to inherit. So thank you and welcome to Awake Radio, John Perkins.
Great to be with you, Kat. Thanks.
Yes. So I actually was thinking of you when I had a guest on, Adam Weissman, was talking about the TTP recently. And when he started talking about, corporations trying to sue people for loss of profits, I just thought that was just so over the top because, again, it's like, the people, indigenous people in all parts of the world attempting to, not just protect their land, but also hold corporations accountable for so much of the pollution, the devastation of the environment, illnesses that they sustain. And, so to hear, corporations actually trying to sue people for loss of profits. What do you make of that?
Well, yeah, of course. It's ridiculous. It's criminal. Ridiculous.
What?
The whole TTP thing is prime for corporations.
What do the people have to do? The public, really needs to get mobilized. I know that. What is, are there, direct steps that people can just really, getting informed and then, taking some actions, what would they be?
Well, I think, what we have to recognize is the corporations hold the power. It's not politicians.
Right.
President of the United States doesn't really have very much power, only in very limited areas. It's the big corporations, and yet the corporations are totally dependent on us to buy their goods and services and invest in them. So we have a lot of power of the corporation. So what I suggest is that people, pick a corporation that you feel particularly passionate about. Maybe it's Monsanto, maybe it's Walmart, maybe it's Exxon, Chevron, whatever it is, and just start a campaign to let that corporation know that you're not going to buy from them until they do whatever it is you want them to do. So if it's Nike, for example, you send out every couple of days, send emails, posts, Twitters, whatever you do, to 10 of your friends or 20, whatever you've got, and ask them to send to 10 or 20 of their friends, and so on and so forth, and craft an email that basically says to Nike or whatever the corporation is that you pick, hey, I love your products, but I'm not going to buy them anymore until you pay the slaves who work for you in other countries like Indonesia a living wage. Change your ways.
Right.
Corporations have to listen to those sorts of things. It's worked in the past. We got rid of apartheid in South Africa by boycotting corporations that supported it. We got big corporations to clean up terribly polluted rivers. All of this during my lifetime. It's effective, but people have to do it.
Right. I mean, I feel like a lot of it has to do with people really, owning their power and just knowing that they do have the power, instead of just thinking that there isn't anything that they could do.
Well, it's not just thinking that there isn't anything they could do. We've actually sent the opposite message. We've let these corporations know, hey, we want cheap oil. And if that means destroying the Amazon, well, go ahead and destroy the Amazon. We'll just look the other way. We want good tennis shoes made fairly inexpensively. If that means using slave labor, we'll just look the other way. It's time that we understood the consequences of these things and sent these messages to corporations. What we want is a world that our children are going to want to inherit. We want an environmentally sustainable, socially just world where everybody can thrive, and instead of these awful, terrible conditions that are being fostered around the world. And we have to take responsibility. We live very well here in the United States. Even those of us who don't consider ourselves to be particularly well off are living an awful lot better than most people around the world. And we're doing this because we've created what I call a death economy, which is an economy based on ravaging the earth, exploiting people. And when people don't give in to us, we wage war against them or threaten to. We need to move beyond that.
And so how to convince people that, right, you don't have to oppress other people in order to live well, that it's exactly the opposite. That it's like when you treat other people well, you live well. When we live in balance and justice and fairness, we all live well.
Yeah, I love the fact that, Henry Ford once said, I want to pay my workers enough money so that every one of them can afford to buy a Ford. And I think if Phil Knight at Nike said that, and the people at Walmart said that, and so on, we'd all be a lot better off.
I actually just wanted to let everybody know that there's a surprise guest is actually available. I hope you're still going to be able to be on with us, like by I told him 6:30, because I did get a call back from Frank Serpico. Like, I called him and I asked him if he could be on with you, and then I never heard from him. And 5 minutes before the show started, he actually called me, and so I mean, it might be like a little bit crowded. And I got a call from Vincent Riggins, and he might be running a bit late, so maybe it's kind of work out okay. Because I wanted to have someone like you who you really like know a lot of people, CEOs and people at the top, and just try to bridge some gaps with like a lot of local people and people that are doing local organizing against things like police brutality, because here in New York and other places in the country, the police, to me, just represent all of this stuff. Like, people talk about police brutality, but the police are just representative of this whole entire system of oppression and capitalism and keeping the people in their places.
Right. Yeah.
And I just, I have an article, one of your recent articles, The Corporatocracy and Us, and you were talking about, leaders in the world meeting in Davos, Switzerland for an economic summit. Oxfam reported that summit on recent economic trends that indicate 85 individuals own more wealth than 50% of the rest of the 85 people, not 85 individuals own more wealth than 50% of the rest of the world.
Isn't that disgusting? We look back at the feudal times in medieval Europe as being horrible, but this is much worse.
And I always believe in calling a spade a spade. I mean, I met you the first time at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies in Rhinebeck, New York, back in either 2001 or 2002. My first.
Hello?
Can you hear me? We're here. John?
Hello?
John?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay. Um, and so, right. I mean, the whole mind body connection thing. So my point, like, calling a spade, 85% of individuals, owning wealth, I mean, calling it like it is, and they're basically extracting wealth, not, earning it legitimately like people tend to maybe think.
Right. Yeah, it's fascinating that most of the big corporations don't pay any taxes in the United States. Microsoft, Apple, Google, Exxon, the oil industry is subsidized at something like $4 billion a year in this country, and they don't pay taxes. Walmart employs something like 1 out of every 100 employees in the United States, and every Walmart employee on average is subsidized to the tune of $6,000 by the rest of us because they don't pay workman's compensation. They hire people for less than 30 hours, so they don't pay workman's compensation or health insurance, et cetera. So we, the American taxpayer, ends up paying that. And yet the Walton family is one of the wealthiest in the country. The 9 or 10 wealthiest people in this country, 4 of them are members of the Walton family, and we're subsidizing them. And they're the very people who will say no more food stamps, no more Social Security, no more Medicare, cut back on all these freebies to the people. And yet they get huge freebies from us. The big corporations are the most heavily subsidized part of our culture, much more so than people out on the street.
I'm not sure if you are familiar with Kenneth O'Keefe. I wanted to play just a minute or two of him because I think this is somebody that I like introducing people that don't know each other. He was a military. He actually denounced his U.S. citizenship, and I think he lives in London. And this is him on RT.
Yes, and it would seem on the surface from a sane point of view that everything is going wrong. But in fact, when you fracture a country along sectarian divide, ultimately you weaken the country. What the last thing that Israel or the United States wants is a strong Nasser-type leader, an Arab nationalist who will seriously ensure that the resources of that country are taken and protected and used for the benefit of the people. That's the last thing that the empire wants and that Israel wants. So while you have these religious fundamentalist nutcases who are running around bombing and doing all sorts of stuff like that, you have a weakened, fractured country in Iraq. And that is the prerequisite for ultimately expanding Israel into the fantasy of the Greater Israel Project. It doesn't seem sane, and it's not sane because those who are trying to carry out these agendas are pure and simple psychopaths.
And
so that's just a minute or so, not even, of Kenneth O'Keefe. He's just kind of like this tell it like it is person. What do you think about what he just said?
Well, yeah, the Middle East is. I agree with what he said. The Middle East is a mess, and we've created most of the mess there. ISIS didn't even exist as far as we know. It certainly wasn't a major power until we attacked Iraq after 9/11. And from everything I can determine, Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11 at all.
Right.
And out of that grew ISIS, and out of that grew huge problems. So, the way to end acts of terror around the globe is not through violence. That just encourages that.
Right.
The way to end acts of terror is to get rid of the desperation that causes people to join terrorist organizations. Yeah, as he said, there's nutcases, there's fanatics, some of them very wealthy, like bin Laden, who will try to rally people, but people will not rally to the nutcases unless they're desperate.
Right.
And so the way to keep them from joining these organizations is to do away with the desperation. And desperation comes from a lack of resources, lack of food, lack of clothing, lack of houses, and feeling that you're being treated unjustly. And of course, there's a long, long history in the Middle East of people in the Middle East feeling that the colonial powers, the European powers, and now the United States and Israel are treating them unjustly. And there's every reason to believe that they're justified in believing that. So what are they going to do? The United Nations isn't protecting them. There are no international courts of law that are protecting them. And so they turn to the people who offer to protect them. And these are the fanatics that we come down on as radical Islamists. Really, these people have next to nothing to do with Islam. These are not Muslim movements. These are movements that use Muslim rhetoric as a way to justify their total acts of terror, their violence, their brutality, in the same way that the Catholics back in the 1500s justified burning witches at the stake and killing thousands of women and Jews and other people in the name of Christianity. In fact, it had nothing to do with Christianity. It was a power play. It was a way of controlling populations. Same thing is happening in the Middle East today, and it's easy for us to say, "Oh, it's those brutal, terrible, violent Muslims." Well, there's nothing brutal or violent about Islam as a religion at all, no more than there is for Christianity or any others. They all have certain things in their traditions that may promote violence. In the Bible, Christ at one point says to his disciples, if you don't have a sword, sell your cape and buy one. And certainly the Old Testament, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, is very violent, as are parts of the Quran. But the fact of the matter is these religions in general preach peace and cooperation. But fanatics come along, whether they're Christian fanatics or Muslim fanatics. We now have Buddhist fanatics who are preaching violence in Myanmar against Muslims there. I mean, it's despicable, but it has nothing to do with the basis of the religion itself. It has everything to do with people trying to gain control and using the language of religion to justify that.
It seems like it more comes down to natural law. I mean, like I'm always blogging about natural law because ultimately that's what it all comes down to, underneath the religion, underneath the politics, underneath the money. And, that's what nobody gets over on the laws of physics. And exactly, if you oppress a person enough or a group of people, eventually natural instincts are just going to kick in and those people are going to fight back. And that doesn't have anything to do with religion or politics. I mean, it's just physics.
Right.
And I was just wanting to get your take on Netanyahu coming here to Washington and talking about Iran nuclear and bomb and trying to do harm to Israel.
Well, there's just a couple of points here. I mean, without getting into all the detail about Israel and the Middle East, I don't think it's ever right for a head of a state of another country to try to influence the politics of the country that isn't theirs. I think it's wrong when we try to influence the politics of Argentina or Ecuador when we send the CIA in or our politicians go and try to change governments and affect the way that people rule. I think it's wrong for Netanyahu to appear before our Congress and try to influence us. He has his own people to take care of. But again, that's not just Netanyahu. I would think it would be wrong for the head of the Iranian government to come and speak to the U.S. Congress and try to influence them against Israel. I just don't think that's appropriate. And listening to Netanyahu's speech, I was struck by a couple of things. First of all, he starts off by basically accusing Iran of being a terrorist state. I mean, he makes some pretty strong statements at the beginning of his talk. And then he says, but we need to work with them to strike a better deal. Well, you don't call someone a criminal and then say you're going to strike a better deal with them. So it was to me, it was a very inconsistent speech, and I think that I think it was totally inappropriate for him to have said the things that he did. I think it was inappropriate for him to appear before our Congress.
And what about Boehner actually having him come here to speak without approval?
That's between Boehner and Obama. I mean, Boehner does not need to get Obama's approval to invite people to speak to Congress. It doesn't legally have to do that, obviously. I think that the fact that he did it the way he did it it's a very, very political move. As we're approaching an election year, he's lining up to get the support of people who are pro-Israel. I happen to have asked on my own Facebook page what people think about Netanyahu coming, and it was an overwhelming response of people in the United States disapproving of it, and including quite a few Jewish people. I think I have a feeling that Netanyahu may have shot himself in the foot in some regards regarding the American Jewish community, but that remains to be seen.
So it's like I always just keep getting this sense that the people that hold the power, I mean, they are not going to give it up. They, and yet they want to just keep blaming those that that are in the lesser position of power. I mean, it's just this constant like vicious cycle that's going on all the time. Whether it's Israel and Palestine, the Koch brothers and the people. It's like they want to hold that incredible position of power over everyone, and then blame the effects of it on everybody else.
What do you mean by blame the effects?
Like by having the all that power and oppressing everyone, and like you were saying before, it creates the conditions of like Hamas. They actually just officially labeled them a terrorist organization when it's just the conditions that create people to do things like that. But yet the people that are creating it, they're not going to stop doing what they're doing, and yet they want to just continue to blame the effects of what they're doing on others.
Right. I don't know. Is there a question there? I'm not sure what you're saying, Kat.
So then, I mean, right. So the people, they're never going to give up their power. So, I mean, it's like up to the people to just, to have to step up and take their power back. I mean, and then, the people that have all the power, of course, like they're never going to, willingly give it up.
No, of course not. Why would they?
And I just feel like the people really need to be prepared. Like this is not going to be easy. I mean, this is going to really, demand a lot. And I just hope that
I don't think it demands a lot. I think all we have to do is let these corporations that control all of this know that we're not going to buy from them.
Right.
I mean, I really don't think it's that big a deal. People aren't doing it. Yeah. Yes, but this is not like we've got to take up our arms and take to the streets and fight these people like the French Revolution or the American Revolution, or even the Selma. People have been talking a lot about Selma now with this movie that's come out and what's going on. About police brutality toward African Americans, but. The fact of the matter is, to change these corporations, we just have to shop differently and let them know that. We've got to let them know. We've got to put the pressure on them, and the way we invest and the way we shop. They control the world, but the marketplace is a democracy. Our government's no longer a democracy. Our elected officials don't listen to those who elect them. They listen to those who give them money, the big corporations. But the big corporations have to listen to us. If enough of us will just speak out against these corporations, as we did in the past, we got rid of apartheid in South Africa by boycotting corporations that supported it. We got corporations to clean up terribly polluted rivers all over the United States. we get corporations to open their doors much wider to women and minorities, and to label foods for, fatty content and calories, et cetera, et cetera. These corporations have to bow to us who buy from them and invest in them if we will just get together and make them do that. And it's not a huge effort. It's really not, especially not now with the internet. Consumer advocacy groups have a lot of power, and anybody who's listening to this program can organize a consumer advocacy group. As I said earlier, just email 10 of your friends, or 20, however many friends you got, and Facebook, and ask them to email 10 of their friends, and ask them to email 10 of their friends, and all of you come together and put the pressure on these corporations. They listen. They have to listen. People don't think corporations listen. I give a lot of talks to corporate executives. I lived in that world. They do listen. They have to listen. If people tell them, I'm not going to buy from you unless you change your ways, and in fact, don't buy from them, and every time you don't buy from them, you send them an email saying, Nike, I would have really loved to buy your sweatpants, but they're made by slaves. I didn't buy them. I bought somebody else's.
Exactly.
I mean, Kat, I don't think it's a big deal. We got to do it.
Well,
people
right.
got to get out from behind the television,
Right.
and not just walk into any store that's convenient and buy the stuff. They've got to put the pressure on, but it's not like we've got to put our lives on the line here. We don't.
I mean, for me, I even think about animals too. Where does the animals come from? And you got to know where your clothes come from. Where the food that you eat comes from, and really be prepared to be a little inconvenienced, I think.
Well, it's not just animals, remember, either. It's the soy is destroying the Amazon, and so tea plantations, and the crystals that we New Age people buy in crystal stores are exploding huge mountains and destroying forests in Brazil and so forth. So we need to be aware of everything. You're right about animals, but let's not stop with the animals. It's true of plants also.
Yeah.
And it's true of all of nature, rivers and mountains and rocks. We're very abusive.
Exactly. Even to our own health, our psychological, spiritual, physical health. I mean, it just and the psychological health of even the corporations, and I mean, it's not a healthy thing what they're doing. I mean, you're not exactly going to have some great spiritual health by droning and bombing innocent civilians in the Middle East. I was actually going to bring Frank Serpico. I told him 6:30. It's a little bit after that, and then pose the question and maybe have a discussion about Homan Square in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get off. I was scheduled to be on for 45 minutes, and I'm going to have to get off in about 5 minutes or so. But
Okay. Sure. Hold on.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available.
Okay, he must have had another call or something. Because I'm calling him like about 10 minutes later than I said I would. But maybe he'll be available for the next part. But okay, so then let me pose to you, Homan Square in Chicago, a black site. What do you make of that?
I have no inside information. It's just what I've read in the press. So I really don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be a bit surprised by what the police do have these sites, just like the CIA does. We have become a police state, and I think we all have to be vigilant and stand up to the terrible abuses that are being conducted by our government, by our police forces, and our military. overseas especially, but now it's going increasingly that way at home too. But we need to recognize that what comes around goes around, or what goes around comes around, or whatever. That, if we turn a blind eye on the torture practices of the CIA in the Middle East and elsewhere, and we think that that's okay, then we've got to expect it's going to come back and haunt us too.
Exactly. William Binney was on a guest last week, and he basically again is just like reiterating the pattern about creating problems and just literally saying that the NSA sold out the security of the people for money. I mean, that's almost an exact quote from him, that they actually create problems because they want more money so that they can expand. So they're actually expanding problems and building more storage facilities for the NSA in places like Bluffdale, Utah, and another place down in Fort Meade, Maryland, so that they can, continue to spy, continue to, expand, their own need. That, it's like they're not needed, but they want to, make like they're needed and expand their importance.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's no question that war makes money and the threat of war. So these organizations are constantly threatening war. I mean, I have no doubt, but what the corporations that produce war material are very happy that Netanyahu spoke in front of the Congress today, because he's scared a lot of people. And so we gear up more to war. The Israelis buy weapons, the Iranians buy weapons, the Americans buy weapons, everybody around that area buys weapons. And it's good for the weapons manufacturers and their insurance companies and their banks and their investment advisors and those who supply them with food and Coca-Cola and everything else. So the threat of war is good business, unfortunately. We really have this economy that's based on warfare, the death economy based on warfare and ravaging the Earth's resources. And we need to turn that around. We need to realize that we can build an economy based on cleaning up pollution and helping desperate people live better lives, etc.
Yeah. So just one last quick one. Edward Snowden, what do you think about, do you think he did the right thing?
Well, absolutely. He's a hero.
Right. And as far as him getting a fair trial, do you think that would ever be possible?
I can't say that it wouldn't be possible, but I think if I were in his shoes, I would be avoiding the United States at this point. I don't think I would trust the system to give him a fair trial at this point.
When the Obama administration has jailed more people under the Espionage Act than any other president in history.
Yeah, and droned more people and dropped more. Yeah, so yeah, I know. Yes, but I'm not surprised. When Obama was running, all my friends were excited and said, "Gee, if he wins, everything will change." And although I have to say I preferred him over his opponent, we have to know that the president of the United States doesn't have very much power. The big corporations control him. They finance the campaigns, and therefore he's a prostitute. I mean, and I'm not knocking Obama. He wouldn't be president if he didn't do that. Whoever gets in the White House has prostituted himself to big corporations. The same can be true for the Senate and most of the Congress people on a national level, not so much on the local level, but on a national level. And we have to understand that we cannot expect, because a person is African American or liberal or a woman or whatever, that they're going to get in the White House and change things. They're not. They can't. And if they get too radical, there'll be a sex scandal against them or a drug scandal or something. It may be true. It may just be trumped up by the FBI. If the FBI decides they want to take a person out of office,
yeah,
they pass a lot of false information to the New York Times, and that's the end of the politician's career.
Do they have jackals anymore? Do they still exist?
Pardon me?
Jackals?
Of course. They just overthrew a couple of years ago, I guess now 4 years ago, was the President Zelaya of Honduras and replaced him with a horrible, brutal dictator, Lobo, President Lobo. And they're everywhere. I mean, oh yeah, and our own politicians have to be very fearful of them too. And for the most part, they don't have to use violence anymore. They can use vicious rumors and take people down. And every major leader around the world and in the U.S. Congress knows that. So it's up to we the people.
Right.
It's not the leaders are going to do it. It's we the people. And
your website is
johnperkins.org, and I would love to have people sign up for my newsletter that comes out once a month. I don't overwhelm people with it, but once a month. And and I'm on Facebook and Twitter, so I look forward to continuing. And thanks, Kat. Thanks for doing all that you do.
Yeah, Mom, trying my best.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, thank you so much.
Have a good day. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Don't let them win, don't let you over. That's what they're hoping for. They want to shutter your mind, shackle it to the floor. It's not hard to figure out the lies you're being told. There is a playbook, an agenda, a blueprint, a goal. So open your eyes wide enough to see the target they are aiming for. You're the enemy. Now in order to defeat them and take back what is yours, you must expose what is evident, what is clear. There is a good, there is a good, there is a bad, there is a side you have to choose. Don't underestimate what they are willing to do. Don't underestimate what they are willing to do. It's a new world that's coming when the old world's dead. The empire is burning down, we're hanging by a thread. It's time to panic to react, to stop this war. Humanity is rising and the truth is coming forth. Television's there to bide your time. There are lies on top of lies just to rule your mind. The water's unfit to drink, the food is unfit to eat. There is a reason they don't give you time to think. There's a reason they don't give you time to think. It's a new world that's coming when the old world's dead. The empire is burning down, we're hanging by a thread. It's time to panic to react, to stop this war. Humanity is rising and the truth is coming forth. Humanity is rising and the truth is coming forth. Whoa. Solid proof, with the camps to keep you in, the laws to keep you quiet. Tyranny is here, there is no choice to deny it. But what comes next? We head into the long night. In the info war, we have just begun to fight. But what comes next? We head into the long night. In the info war, we have just begun to fight. In the info war, we have just begun to fight. It's a new world that's coming when the old world's dead. The empire is burning down, we're hanging by a thread. It's time to panic to react, to stand once more. Humanity is rising and the truth is coming forth. Humanity is rising and the truth is coming forth.
Okay, I'll call you on this number. Easy running a radio show. Okay, we have Low Revolution from Chicago Anonymous is with us. Welcome to Organic News here on Awake Radio. Who am I speaking to?
Hi, you are speaking with Flow Revolutionary, Chicago Anonymous. That's an alias I go under.
So you got